Sure. Yeah,
All
no
right.
problem. Appreciate you telling me.
Yeah, no worries. So what you said about a question about earthbending?
Yeah, earthbending. I was just
Okay.
wondering if you clone like an earthbended land, um, does it maintain like all the properties of it being earthbended, or would it just come in as a 0/0 land and just die immediately?
No. So, how familiar are you with layers?
Decent.
Okay. All right. So a quick primer of layers. Let me just. I'm not going to go into super detail on it, but just kind of enough to understand what's happening here. So when the game looks at an object, particularly permanents in play, it looks at 7 layers, right? And to determine the characteristics of it, and then layer 7 is broken down into 4 sublayers. All right, so it looks at what's printed on the card, and then it looks at how that's modified by each layer after that. So for example, layer 4 is a type changing layer. So like earthbending, causing that land to become a creature changes it in layer 4, right? It's giving it a type that it didn't previously have. You could also have a type change that removes types it didn't previously have. Layer 6 is the abilities layer, so like something that says target creature gains flying, that's happening in layer 6, and so on like that, right? So each layer kind of governs a different aspect of a characteristic.
Gotcha.
Um,
Yeah.
Layer 1 is the copyable layer. So when you like if you have a clone enter the battlefield as a copy of another creature, it makes all of the characteristic changes to itself in layer 1, right? So it gets the new mana value, the creature type, the power, toughness, all those things are happening in layer 1. And then any effect that tries to copy something only cares about what's printed on the card and what's in layer 1. Everything after that is completely ignored for the purpose of any copy effects. So what that means is that if you have a forest in play and you earthbend that forest, so that means in layer 4 it becomes a creature. It's still a land, but it adds the creature type. In layer 7, which is the power toughness layer, 7B is where it sets power and toughness. It becomes a 0/0, right? And then in layer 7C, it's getting those +1/+1 counters, modifying its power and toughness. Okay. Um
Gotcha.
if you make a copy of that land, all it cares is what's printed on the card, and there's nothing in the copyable layer. Everything from layers 2 to 7 is completely ignored. So you just make a land if you're copying that particular thing. So if you've earthbent a land and you have a thing that says, make a token copy of target creature, that earthbent land is a valid target because it's a creature, but the copy you make will not be a creature. It will only be a land because the fact that it's a creature is not part of its copyable characteristics.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then in regards to the earthbend, the delayed trigger that says if it would die or go to exile, it comes back tapped. That is only for that specific permanent. That's not something that can be copied to anything else. So
Gotcha.
that's just a delayed trigger that that happens as a result of resolving the earthbend ability.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate it,
no
man.
problem.
Okay, I have some other questions as well.
Okay.
So I'm just been running Ashling a lot.
This is the new Ashling, the commander
yeah,
for the okay.
Yeah, the Limitless.
Oh yeah.
If you sack Ashling and she makes a token copy of herself, is that token copy also considered to be your commander?
No. So
okay,
the commander-ness, or however you want to say it, like the commander designation only belongs to that specific card,
right?
And here's the cool thing: it doesn't even matter what form that card is in. Like, if I play an Ixidor that turns all the creatures face down, that's still your commander, and you still deal commander damage with it.
Yeah, you can like Cyberman conversion it and then flip it down, and it's still your commander.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff,
Yeah.
Okay. My favorite aspect of it is that, like, if you're running the commanders that are like the legendary creature in the background, and if you can animate the background, you can hit someone with commander damage.
That's fun. Yeah.
And the wild thing is the game tracks the commander at all times. So, like, for example, if you let's say you have your commander on the battlefield, right, and I evacuation, right? So evacuation, put all creatures into their owner's hands, right? No problem. Your commander's now in your hand. Of course, everybody knows your commander's in your hand because it was on the battlefield. We know where it went. The game knows this. Now, let's say, for example, you had a scroll rack, right? And you know, scroll rack, you can basically swap some cards from your hand to the top of your library. If you put your commander on top of your library, even though it went from a hidden zone to another hidden zone, we all get to know that. Like, we don't necessarily need to know which card it is on top of your library, but we get to know that it's
known that the commander is in the top of that
is somewhere in that
scroll rack,
library, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, I never knew you had to declare that.
Oh yeah, because
well, of course you would know, because like, where else would the commander be?
Well, but what I'm saying is,
they don't know what cards you're putting away. Usually.
But if it was in your hand, and you know, let's say you now have 5 cards in your hand, and you scroll rack 2 of them from your hand on top of your library.
Oh.
And one of them was your commander, just because you really needed certain cards, and you're like, oh, I'll draw the commander back. It's fine. We get to know that your commander did that. Or like, let's say, for example, let's say that you put your commander on top of your library. Again, this is probably something that's never going to happen, but just, you know, I'm giving an example to show the.
No, that's interesting.
So let's say that you did this. You scroll rack your commander on top of your library. We get to know it's on top of your library. If you have a way to manifest the top card of your library and put it on the battlefield face, we get to know.
Oh,
right?
Interesting. Yeah,
because the commander-ness is tied to the card, regardless of the characteristics of that card. So as long as it is in, so every player gets to know what zone it is in, and then if it is in a public zone, even if it's hidden characteristics, so if like face down is a manifested, we get to know that it's your commander.
I did not know that part.
Yeah.
I really did not know that part. Okay. I've never had it come up, but
sure. And why would you, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah.
What was another weird one? Oh, alternate costs. Being that if there's
like
different alternate costs that are being paid at the same time, can you layer which alternate cost? Not alternate cost. Sorry, additional cost. Can be paid in what order?
So give me an example. What are you talking about?
The example is in Rogsai, you have Underworld Breach in play. You have 2 cards in the, I think it's 2 cards in the graveyard, and one of them being a Diabolic Intent, I believe, and you have Roger on the field. And you have the mana to pay for Diabolic Intent. So can you move Diabolic Intent from the stack, from the graveyard onto the stack using the effect of Underworld Breach, being able for you to cast it as additional cost of exiling 3 cards from your graveyard? Can you layer it such that you sacrifice Roger, and then Roger will go to the graveyard as additional cost to cast the Diabolic Intent? Then having Roger in the graveyard, that would be the 3rd card that you would need to exile for you to be able to fulfill the additional cost.
Right. So Diabolic Intent has the additional cost, sacrifice a creature. Underworld Breach has the additional cost of when you cast things of exile 3 cards from your graveyard.
Can you attempt to cast that even if you don't?
I'm sorry, has the alternate cost, not additional cost. But yeah.
So can you pay the alternate cost of paying as mana value plus exiling 3 cards from the graveyard?
Yeah,
you
actually
have 3 cards in the graveyard.
So here's the thing: you don't actually have to pay a spell's cost until it goes to resolve.
No, hold on. No. What you just said is not correct. The way you said.
Sorry.
I think I know what you intended to say.
You know what I mean, though.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Let me show you, because a lot of players shortcut this process, and a lot of times it doesn't matter, but sometimes it really does. And so I want to show you the steps for casting a spell, right? Like, there is a very specific order.
Yeah.
And this will kind of help you understand what's happening here, right? So number 1 is just you announce the intent, right? You say,
Yeah.
I plan to, I am proposing casting this spell. Once you do that, nobody gets priority to take any actions until you have completed the entire process, right?
Mhm.
Step 2 is just make choices, right? So this is where you say, I am going to use this alternate cost. I am going to make X equal this value. I am going to name this target. I'm going to choose this mode. All the
Yeah.
choices you would have to make are made here, right?
Okay, so
Then
sorry. Before you go to 3, with the announce, is that like yeah, you can announce that I will cast a spell, but is that moving that spell from that
it
location
is
to
moving
the
it from
stack?
one zone to the stack. Yeah. Although
Yeah. Okay.
it's not officially on the stack yet. Like you're moving it to the
Okay.
stack to show intent, but the
Okay.
game does not recognize that you have cast that spell yet.
It's in
Okay.
the process of being moved to the stack.
Basically, yeah, but there is no
Yeah.
in between, so it's in either where it
Yeah.
was or where it is, kind of a
Yeah.
thing, right?
Exactly. Okay.
All right. So step 3 is the game checks the legality of everything you just said, right?
Yeah.
So are you able to make the choices you just made? It double checks, right? All right, cool. So then the next step is you determine cost, right? And this is where you start with, all right, the base value of the spell, accounting for alternate costs, are you paying the evoke cost like in your in Ashling and stuff like that, or using an alternate cost like overload, things like
Yeah.
that. And then we add any additional cost to the math, and then, or that's, additional cost and taxes. Then we apply reductions, and then we apply trinosphere if necessary, right?
Yeah. So does Trinisphere have his own special?
It really does.
Like,
It is the last thing.
yeah.
It is named
Yeah.
by it is by name in the official rules,
Okay.
comprehensive rules of
Okay.
Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
And
Because
it's the last thing to apply after reductions.
yeah, I've heard about like Trinisphere is always the last thing. I didn't realize is like it has its own like separate like
no,
sort of
so-
like layer in that.
yeah.
Yeah, if Trinisphere is on the field, everything costs at least 3.
Yeah.
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 So
I
anything that
realized
would cost less than 3, either due to cost reductions or the
Yeah.
alternate costs and all that, Trinisphere applies and goes, actually, let's bump that up to a total of 3. After
Yeah.
that is step 5 of activating mana abilities. So this is where you tap lands, you tap mana rocks, you sacrifice treasures, you can sacrifice creatures to Ashnod's altar, you can do any number of those things, right? Then step 6 is this is where you pay costs. All right. And now when it comes to paying costs, each individual type of cost can be paid in any order. Now, very important on that is that, again, so you're going to use the mana you've already floated from either before casting or in the mana ability part. If there's any additional costs, like in addition, tap creatures, in addition, untap creatures, in addition, sacrifice a creature, in addition, do these things, right?
Yeah.
You can do them in any order, but all of like for example, if I have a thing that says that has a cost to tap 3 creatures and untap 3 creatures as part of the cost for whatever reason, right?
Yeah.
I could tap all 3 and then untap those 3 by doing it in that order. What I couldn't do is tap 1 to satisfy one of those 3, untap that same creature to satisfy one of those 3, tap that. I can't break it up like that. Like once I start untapping creatures, I have to untap all the creatures. Once I start tapping creatures, I have to tap all the creatures. Once I start paying mana, I have to pay all the mana. Once I start exiling cards from my graveyard, I have to exile all 3 of those cards. So that being said, for the Diabolic Intent, I can begin this process here by paying the mana that I have floating. Go ahead and do the additional cost of sacrificing a creature, and then do the additional cost of exiling 3 cards from my graveyard, including the one that I just sacrificed.
Okay.
I took a long way around of kind of answering your question, but I want you to kind of see now. And then the last step is just, it is officially cast. Yeah.
Oh, that actually got me thinking about another question. With any card like Garruk's Uprising or something that checks the power or toughness of a creature, does that trigger always go in the stack regardless of the creature's power or toughness, and does it check at resolution of the effect resolving.
Gotcha. Let me get the exact wording on it so I can. I think I have it in
'Cause-
front of me here.
Yeah, Garruk's Uprising. Whenever a creature you control with power 4 or greater enters, draw a card. So like I'm thinking like if you have like a 1/1 that enters, but as it's entering there you have another, that trigger would go on the stack, and then if you have another trigger that boosts that creature's power to
Gotcha.
further than
So
4.
it's going to depend on the effect that's boosting the power, right? So here's the thing. Garruk's Uprising, the way it's worded, looks for the specific triggering event of a creature with power 4 or greater entering the battlefield. Not a creature entering if it has power 4 or greater. It's when a creature with power 4 or greater enters, right? And so what that means is that if that creature entered as a 4 power creature, so either it's just natively a 4 or 5, 6 power thing, or it's like a 1/1 that's somehow entering with 3/1/1 counters, or you have static effects that are giving all your creatures get +2/+2, and you have a 2/2 enter, it enters as a 4/4. Garruk's Uprising will see that. But if you have like a Great Henge that says, when a non-token creature enters, put a 1/1 counter on it and draw a card. A 3/3 entering the battlefield entered as a 3/3, and then Great Henge triggers to give it a +1/+1 counter. Garruk's Uprising did not see the triggering event of a creature with power 4 or greater enter, so there's no trigger to go on the stack.
Okay. How would that like? Are there effects? Like, can it be worded in such a way that that is the case?
Yeah. So for example, there's a lot of things that are worded differently that say when a creature enters, do a thing, right? So like Warstorm Surge, for example, is a great example where Warstorm Surge just cares that a creature entered, and then you deal damage equal to its power, right? So the creature enters as a 1/1, but before that trigger resolves, somehow it's become a 20/20. Cool, you're dealing 20 points of damage, right? Like that, it cares as it resolves.
Yeah.
Now,
when a creature enters the battlefield under your control, because it doesn't matter what the power toughness is, because there's no conditional if clause, right?
Now,
so it just sees creature enter, trigger on stack. When it resolves, then it checks that creature's power, right?
Right. Now,
but you still have to declare any target.
You do
when it goes on stack. Yeah.
Yeah. Now to address something you kind of touched on there, if it's worded with that intervening if clause. So if it said when a creature enters, if its power is 4 or greater, draw a card, right?
Yeah.
So at that point, what has to happen is intervening if. So the way a trigger is formatted is whenever we're at, followed by triggering event, followed by effect. That's just the default format for a trigger, right? But if there's an intervening if, which is in between the triggering event and the effect, right? So when a creature enters, if its power is 4 or greater, draw a card. Let's say something was worded that way.
Yeah.
The intervening if, of course, has to be true as it would resolve. So, for example, if you have a 4/4 enter and triggers that, and I can give it -1/-1 before that trigger resolves, the trigger doesn't get to resolve because it's a 3/3, right? It doesn't get to do the thing, right? Because that if wasn't true. But the if also has to be true at the time of the triggering event for it to go on the stack to begin with. So if in that instance, so if it said when a creature you control enters, if its power is 4 or greater, draw a card. Or for example, let me give you another one where Test of Endurance, right? Test of Endurance is an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, if your total life is 50 or greater, win the game, right?
Yeah.
That intervening if, of course, has to be true when it tries to resolve. So if you're at 50 exactly and it goes on the stack and I lightning bolt you for 3, you don't win the game, right?
Exactly.
But at the same time, if you begin your upkeep and you're at like 49 life and you have something that you can activate to give you 2 more life, like sack of food or something, gain 3 life, but your life was not 50 at the moment of that triggering event, the beginning of your upkeep, that trigger doesn't get to go on the stack, even if the if would be true at a later time.
Okay, because it checks the condition of so it checks the condition before and after. So
It checks it at the
upon
moment of the
activation
triggering
and
event
resolution.
and at the
Yeah.
moment it tries to resolve. Correct.
Yeah, so at activation and resolution. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Now, there's a little nuance to it though.
Yeah.
Let's say, for example, let's change it up, and if it said at the beginning of your upkeep, you win the game if your life total is 50 or greater.
Yeah.
That will go on the stack.
Yeah, because winning the game is a condition that is
Well,
that's
the
the
winning,
activation
if
condition.
the way it
But
is
there's nothing
if
there.
if the if comes after the effect, that just means the trigger gets to go on the stack, and as the trigger resolves,
then it checks
the
after
condition.
the if, right?
Right.
Yeah. So when, just as mechanical game sense, when a ability resolves that is targeting a permanent or player, and after has gone on the stack and that permanent or player is being verified as a legal target, but before that spell resolves, that permanent or player becomes an illegal target. How does the game verify that, like, that target is illegal? Like, when does that spell get checked?
Sure. So there's a few times that legal targets need to be legal, right? So for a spell or ability that requires one or more targets, so it specifically says the word target, or it's implied target if you're casting an aura, it has to have all of its legal targets as it's being put on the stack, right? So so for example, I think, what is it? Decimate, I think, is the one that like targets like 4 different things, but
land, creature, enchantment, artifact.
Right,
and it has to have all the legal targets at time of casting.
Exactly. Like you have to have one of each of those as a legal target. Exactly. So at the time of putting it on the stack, I mentioned yesterday about the steps of casting a spell. There's that point where it checks legality. It's like, okay, wait, this requires these legal targets. Do you have those legal targets? Great, let's move forward, right? So now we're at a point where the spell is officially cast. It's on the stack. We check for relevant triggers, state-based act, all that stuff, right? Now, let's say that you'd cast Decimate, and the creature that you targeted gains hexproof or shroud before that Decimate gets to resolve, right?
Yes.
So what happens is, as it goes to resolve, it checks again to make sure that it still has legal targets. Now, here's the thing, though. If it started with more than one legal target, and it still has at least one legal target as it goes to resolve, then it does as much as it can. So in the case of like giving the creature hexproof, well, the rest of it still does the thing. Like, it still destroys the land and the artifact and the enchantment. It still does as much as it can. It just doesn't touch the creature. Now, let's say, for example, I targeted all 4 things are your permanents, and you cast Heroic Intervention. So now all of your permanents have hexproof. So now what that means is, as my Decimate tries to resolve, if it has no legal targets remaining, if it started with at least one target and now it has no legal targets, the moment it tries to resolve, it fails to resolve. It fizzles off the stack. Now, this checks specifically as it's trying to resolve. So what I mean is, let's say, for example, I try to Swords to Plowshares your creature, right? I'm going to exile target creature, and then in response, you go, oh, well, I'm going to give this creature hexproof, right?
Yes.
The Swords to Plowshares doesn't immediately fizzle. It has to, we wait until it tries to resolve, because there's still around a priority, and I could say, oh, well, I'm going to sudden spoiling and make your creatures lose all abilities. Well, now it's lost the hexproof, and so my Swords to Plowshares now gets to resolve normally. Now, the difference would be if I try to Swords to Plowshares your creature, and in response, you Ghostly Flicker it. Right, like it leaves the battlefield and re-enters. Now it's a new object that Swords to Plowshares has no idea what it is. But what I could do is I could deflecting swat my own Swords to Plowshares onto the new instance of your creature. There's still priority to do that before it tries to resolve. So the point
Yep.
is, it checks while you are choosing targets when you're putting it on the stack, and it checks as it wants to resolve. So after priority has passed and nobody took an action and we try to resolve it, it double checks to make sure it has all at least one legal target. And if it does as much as it can. If it doesn't
Yeah.
have if it doesn't have a single legal target remaining, then it doesn't do anything, even if it had other effects that were supposed to happen. So like if I do a thing that says, return target creature to its to its owner's hand and draw a card, right? And you give that creature shroud or hexproof, none of the effects get to happen. Like I don't get to draw a card. It didn't get to do anything.